So today I'm going to share with you one of my approaches in terms of finding a job that is really aligned to what you want, to what you believe in, and at the same time making sure that you ace your interview while doing that. In the market, you have two types of people. You have those who will be looking at what's available in the market and try to align themselves to that while knowing exactly that the market is kind of crowded in a way or another. And you have the second group who will be those who will be really understanding what they really want and what they really believe in, and then they try to find organizations, employers and companies which will be aligned to that 100%. And here's the trickiest part about this process. Trying to know ourselves, trying to really understand what kind of values driving us every single day, what kind of skills we have, what are the things that we can do and cannot do, is kind of uncomfortable in a way or another. During the process, here's what we discovered then. What we're really good at in terms of skill set, can we do the job or not, can we deliver to a certain extent, to a certain capacity in a way, and what we really believe in, who we really are. This is basically some sort of capacity to acknowledge the type of interests and values that keep us moving forward in a way or another. Once a fair assessment is done, then we will be looking at the market. We will be looking at employers that could be aligned in a way or another to what we're looking for. That means in a way also that we'll be applying for less jobs, because our search or our understanding of ourselves and our capacity will be much more clear and structured in a way that gives us a possibility to focus only on the things that matter to us and the things that we can do exactly. Now, how do we translate that kind of assessment into a much better performance during the interviews? We'll be focusing on three main things in here. First, we'll be looking at building a strong value proposition. Second, we will be looking at showcasing our learning history. And third, we will be looking at presenting our growth and development needs. Let me explain that to you. So let's start with the first one, building a strong value proposition. The first one will be the employer buying motivators. Here you will be really trying to find the bottom line of why this employer is really trying to fill that position and what kind of problem they are trying to solve at this point. This can be seen and understood while looking at the job description and trying to understand the context around it. What kind of issues or challenges we are trying to highlight as an employer, and really looking at the core problem. Can I understand, or do I see some sort of a trend where this new employee will be looking at a major or minor challenge to solve? The second component of building a strong value proposition will be your supporting qualifications. Here we're speaking really about the type of skills, experience, credentials, certifications, anything that is really relevant for the job without really focus on anything else. So anything else that is not really relevant for the context of the position, the company, or what is required in the job is not really relevant. The third component of building a strong value proposition, which is something I really like, and it's going to be your unique added value. And this is something that is going to be different from a person to another. And here I'm going to really ask you to focus on what you're really unique in, something that you're really specialized in, something that you're really comfortable with, something that is really dear to you and that you're trying to bring to your new employer. It could be not necessarily required for the job, but you really understand and you really think that this could be valuable in that very specific context. So now it's simple. If you really can look at the employer buying motivator, match them with your unique added value and your qualifications, we are starting to see a good mix and you're starting to get the attention from the hiring manager. Now what's next? How do you make the hiring manager understand your unique story, or at least, let's say, make sense of your story? Because if you're approaching all the interviews in some sort of a robotic way or robotic manner, I'm pretty sure that you're not going to be necessarily on the top of the list. You're going to be maybe put on the side because you may have some sort of interesting skills or experience, but I'm going to be looking at someone who's going to be really offering us a compelling story of why we should bring them in. This is where it gets interesting, because here we will be looking at two main blocks. The first one is going to be understanding and showcasing or presenting your learning history, and the second one will be really explaining what is your growth and training and learning plan or objectives in a way. So how do you think about the learning history? I've been interviewing thousands of people for the last few years, be it in the Middle East and North Africa, and in Canada and the US. And I find it really surprising that whenever I ask someone about what did they learn in the last 5 years, for example, or 10 years, I get that kind of pose where they are not really sure about this, and they'll be like, oh, I didn't really expect this kind of question, because they're really comfortable listing whatsoever they have done in there, or maybe sharing their achievements. But at the same time, I'm trying to put things into context again and making sure that I understand what did they learn, because it's also important to understand that some people can be in a job for 5 years, but they didn't necessarily learn something big because they've been repeating the same thing all over again. Yes, they indeed learned something at the beginning, most probably, but somehow there was this kind of period where it's almost like a plateau where they didn't really move much, but they didn't really challenge themselves in a way. So I'm really interested in what did you learn? And I'm really asking a lot of people usually before they go to the interviews, and making sure that they put things into context, and before they speak to the hiring manager, go back to your work history and try to find a way and remember what did you learn in each one of these blocks. It could be something about the business, about a process, about the teamwork, about anything that is maybe related to the technology used. All these things can help me really understand what kind of growth potential you've had or growth you've had in the last few years. Second thing, which some people don't necessarily like, understanding what you really want in terms of training needs or development. So I ask people sometimes in the interview, or too many times in the interview, especially at the very end, so I'm not really interested in what you would like to become in the next 3 or 5 years, because we never know what happens, especially in our context today. But I'm more interested that in an ideal environment or in an ideal scenario, and if you're going to be joining us as a company, what are you interested to learn? And that gives me an indication first on very specific and simple things. What am I interested to learn as a potential new employer? Because let me put it this way, way too many people find themselves in a position where they say, I'm looking for growth opportunities, but I didn't find them there. That's why I'm applying for your job. Great. So making sure that we don't repeat the same thing all over again. Tell me about your objectives in terms of learning, and I'll tell you exactly here if this is something we can offer or not. We don't necessarily need to have this 100% aligned, because training or development needs can be different from a person to another. But at the same time, I'm trying to make sure that I present again a compelling story to the hiring manager, making sure that they understand, if I'm doing this for your team, for the business today, this is what I'm expecting in return. If I don't have that 100%, what is it that is offered by the company right now that could make me think in a way or another of joining, or making sure that this could be also interesting for my development plan? This could be also risky, because sometimes hiring manager, they will tell me, I'm not interested in having this person in my team because they have such X or Y expectation about learning specific things, and I'm not sure I can offer them that, which is a fair thing. But at the same time, it could be frustrating for the candidate because they kind of like the job, but the learning opportunities are not necessarily aligned to that. What I do all the time, I repeat the same process all over again and again and again. Reason is simple. I want to make sure that regardless of the environment I'm going to be joining, this is something that is aligned to my values and interests. First, this is something that offering me a job that I can do, that can challenge me also to learn certain new other things on the day-to-day, but also in the short and mid and long term, I'm going to be having those growth opportunities which are very specific, because I'm not just interested to join a company that is telling me that, hey, we have growth opportunities, but I'm more interested in a company that has a structured or more clear development process where they guide their employees from a place to another, from a platform to another, so they can succeed and they can stay for a longer term with the company. But here's also something I would like to share with you. There are different approaches to interviews, to job search, to career development, to really finding the right job for you. I believe that what I've been presenting here can be really important, can be really relevant for way too many people in the market, especially when they really focus on what they want and what they believe in, and then finding a job that is really aligned to their skills and experience, and also an employer that can offer them the right development opportunities. But sometimes one of these elements cannot necessarily work 100%, and you have to make a choice, meaning that if I'm not, or at least I'd say if I'm not taking one of these areas into consideration, will it be something that I'll be taking in a way or another? But at least at the very end, we're taking a much more better, or let's say we're given a much more better impression during the interviews. Interviews are really a good exercise to practice your communication skills, to practice whatsoever you'd like to present to a different audience that is different from your current employer or your group of friends or your social network in a way. So that is really a situation where I try to always make sure that people practice in a way that they attend as many interviews as they can, because it really offers them some kind of perspective in terms of what is available out there. Is it something that I can do or not? If I'm missing certain skills that the market is requiring at this point, can I do this or not? But also, and again I repeat this, presenting a more compelling story. People have a way of going to the interviews where they just learn things by heart, and it shows. Like when you're interviewing hundreds of people, like on a monthly basis, you really see that way too many of them are missing the mark, just because instead of focusing on themselves, they just want on preparing whatsoever is available out there on the internet, and then trying to read by heart or remember by heart the job description so they can impress the hiring manager. Very few hiring managers are impressed by that, unless the environment is not the best within that market. But if you're really looking at the best jobs out there and really leaving that kind of positive impression during interviews, make sure that you follow a certain process where you build your story, you understand what the employer needs, you bring that kind of mix all together, and you add on top of it your value proposition, the kind of very unique skills and experience you can bring to that employer. And from there you go to the interviews and you make sure that there is a certain logic from where you used to be, where are you now, and where are you heading in a way or another in the next few years. That gives a better understanding of who you are. Will you be selected 100%? Sometimes not, but I prefer doing that and making sure that I leave that kind of very strong impression instead of doing something different and people will just forget about me. Hope that you got some sort of value out of this. I'm trying to really take things from a more practical angle, especially that people are kind of lost in a way where they're not really sure about what to say here and there. How with the interview process from a company to another, obviously it's very different from a place to another, but let's make sure that regardless of what you're doing, you're really focusing on things that could be transferable from a scenario to another. Cheers.